Okay, good evening, everyone. Our chair, Heather Hamilton, is having some technical difficulties right now. I see she just dropped off and will hopefully be returning soon. But we do usually get started with announcements and also with public comment. So why don't we go ahead and do that and see if any members of the board have announcements. I see Bernard Green.
Yeah. On Thursday, June 3rd, I had the honor of briefly attending an award ceremony at the police department. Unfortunately, I could only stay briefly because of a conflicting meeting. We have those conflicts a lot these days. But it was important for me to show up and express support for these town employees who are not always appreciated. Several officers were recognized for their achievements and actions that took place in 2020. Nominations were submitted by members of the department and voted on by members of the department's awards committee. Officer of the Year was awarded to Sergeant Casey Hatchett for distinguishing herself by exceptional conduct and extraordinary contributions towards the mission of the Brookline Police Department, working on the emergency management team that helped lead the town's prevention, response, and COVID recovery efforts. She was also cited for her great work on my police reform committee, spending many of her own off-duty hours in the public spotlight to make the community and the police department better. Public Service Award was awarded to Officer Caitlin Keneally and Detective Michelle Lawler for outstanding contributions to the community through difficult situations. They were cited for being available to a Brookline High School student who shortly before graduation, really tragically, lost her mother in an accident and needed support to get through graduation. And it was Keneally and Lawler who she called upon to provide that support during graduation. I believe they drove her to the ceremony and sort of stayed there with her. Some may see this support as something for a social worker with police officers limited to chasing robbers. But in Brookline, that's what community policing means. And it's a reality that takes many forms. A life-saving medal was awarded to Officers Sean Williams, Evans Alfred, and Brian Merrigan. These officers were working a private detail on Boylston Street when they were notified of a medical emergency on a passing MBTA bus. The officers boarded the bus and started to perform CPR on an unresponsive person who we learned later was a grocery store employee trying to get to work. After multiple shocks from the automated external defibrillator on the bus and continuous CPR, the person was revived and transported to the hospital. What's significant here is that they're performing these duties knowing that they were at risk with only minimal personal protective gear that they had from their detail. And the first ever medal for exemplary service in crisis intervention was awarded to Officer John Jennings, who conducts himself in a manner that exemplifies the principles of crisis intervention. He was among the first group of Brookline officers who signed up for CIT training. And he is equally adept at working with individuals in acute crisis, as well as vulnerable members of the Brookline community who are living with ongoing, lesser challenges. He regularly works with adults and families living with mental health concerns and substance misuse disorders and developmental challenges. He's cited as having a calm and measured response to various incidents and increasing the likelihood of positive outcomes for everyone involved.
You have 30 seconds.
Okay. Some but not all of what Officer Jennings and other officers do could be done by social workers, and we are trying to take some of that burden off the police department. But a lot of what they do is really too dangerous for social service workers who in any event are not available 24/7. Finally, the Commendation Medal is awarded every year to those officers who have reached a total of 5 letters of commendation. And officers Brian Bridges and Evans Alfred reached this milestone. So I just wanted to let people know of that ceremony and thank and congratulate the awardees of this year's awards.
Thank you, Bernard. And I'll hand it over to Heather to officially introduce the meeting, which I haven't done yet, and before opening it up to more updates. Go ahead, Heather.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you for pitching in. I'm going to turn my video off just to conserve bandwidth. I'm having some technical difficulties if you can't see that. Okay, so good evening. This is the regular select board meeting for Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. Like all meetings during the COVID-19 state of emergency, this meeting is being held remotely on the Zoom webinar platform and is being recorded. If you do not want your likeness to be recorded and archived, attendees are allowed to engage in the meeting without sharing their video and also have the option to call in by phone, which I have a feeling I may be doing by the end of the night. So have we all been given the opportunity to make announcements? Miriam.
Thank you. I'll keep mine very brief. I just want to let everybody know that the Brookline Department of Public Health is holding a COVID-19 vaccine clinic Saturday, June 12th from 11 to 1 p.m. in the Denny Room at 11 Pierce Street. It's open to all Brookline residents 18 plus. It's both the J&J and the Moderna vaccine, but registration is required. And I just put the 2 links in the chat for anyone who's interested. That's it. Thanks.
Excellent. Anyone else? John.
Thanks very much. And I'm going to rely on Devin actually for this first one. And it's a follow-up to Bernard's announcement. There's a photo of the officers, which was of the officers mentioned by Bernard. There it is. And I'll just mention their names quickly. And this is not in any particular order. Caitlin Keneally, Detective Michelle Lawler. And then we have, excuse me a second, Sean Williams, Evans Alfred, and Brian Merrigan. And then there is Chief Mark Morgan. So I'll join with all of the members of the board, I'm sure, in congratulating these officers who were honored this week. Second quick announcement, but a very important one. Just to let everybody know, upcoming is Juneteenth, and Brookline has not had a Juneteenth celebration before. Juneteenth is also known as Emancipation Day, also known as Freedom Day. It is June 19th, and thanks to the Brookline POC, People of Color Committee, and other organizations, and also the Brookline Community Foundation and the town of Brookline, we're going to have our first annual Juneteenth celebration coming up on June 19th. It's a celebration that anyone and everyone can be part of by first gathering at the Ridley School at 10 a.m. And then proceeding to take part in a Freedom March ending at the Brookline Avenue Park at 11 a.m. And that will be followed by a lot of music, dancing, kids' games, and food, which is always my favorite part of celebrations. So June 19th, for the first time in Brookline, and quick word about helping all of this to come together. There has been private fundraising, generous people have donated, organizations have donated, the town has kicked in. The only thing missing right now from the planning is a few dollars that are going to have to cover some expenses that are not yet covered. And I don't know about, well, I think I do know about my other board members. I can't believe for a second that any of them would do anything but say yes to helping to cover the remaining expenses, which won't be great, of this Juneteenth celebration. That's not a formal vote by any means, but it's just a note of reassurance for those.
You have 30 seconds.
I'm done. Thanks, Devin.
Great. Thank you so much. Raul.
Sure. Thank you. And I'll be brief on this. I just wanted to give it up for all those town meeting members that went through 8 nights, I think it was, of town meeting, an unprecedented number. And also to the folks at Big, who always make it possible for folks to tune into these meetings, but all the folks that the moderator, Kate Poverman, mentioned on the last night of the town meeting who made it possible. I had an opportunity last week to testify in favor of legislation that would allow us to continue to make not just town meeting, but other meetings available for people to participate and members to participate remotely. I think there's no question in anyone's mind that maintaining the consistent level of participation that we saw through 8 nights of town meeting would not have been possible if those meetings were in person. And did not allow for people who were, putting their kids to bed or taking care of other family members or simply having work the next morning to be able to participate, for 4+ hours each night for a long time there. So in any case, I just wanted to thank all the volunteers, all the town meeting members, and everybody involved who helped put that together. And hopefully we can find a way through the state legislature to continue the kind of access that's been created as a result of this terrible pandemic, and maybe we can salvage something out of it through that legislation. So thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to you, Raul, for public comment.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for public comment. This is an opportunity for us to hear your perspective on the issues in Brookline that matter to you. We do have a few rules I'd like to share. First, each person speaking is limited to 3 minutes. You don't need to use the entire time, but you may if you like. Please refrain from personal attacks and from addressing personnel issues during your comments. Members of the public sometimes raise questions during public comment. We may be able to provide a quick answer to a question, but are more likely to work with staff to get a more thorough answer and respond over email. Devin Fields will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining, and when your time is up, please conclude your remarks at that time. If you have more to say, you're welcome to send an email to board members expressing your thoughts in greater detail. That's it. Devin, who's first on our list?
The first person signed up for public comment is Alok Somani. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you, Devin. Hi, this is Alok. I'm going to leave my video off. First of all, thank you to the select board for all the work you do. I've watched a few of the select board meetings and really impressed with the work you guys do and all the time you spend on this. I originally signed up because I wanted to comment on agenda item number 6, which was a discussion and a possible vote on submitting a warrant article for the fall town meeting to expand marijuana licensing. Licensing for marijuana establishments. Unfortunately, I couldn't find any documents on the website that were there to frame the discussion or talk about the policy goals. So I guess I'll just keep my comments very brief. Just 2 thoughts I'd like to share as a resident of Brookline. One is, it's been said to me a few different times that the policy goal for attracting marijuana establishments to Brookline is primarily the tax revenue that we could potentially earn. And I guess my comment is, could we please, I would love to, as a resident of Brookline, understand better what the policy goals are for issuing more marijuana licenses, both for retailers as well as for other establishments that are now legal under Massachusetts law. And then the second comment I'd like to make is, my understanding of the select board is an executive body. So I was quite curious as to why the select board thought that it was important for the select board to actually submit that warrant article and not leave that for residents of Brookline. Thank you. That's all my comments.
The next person signed up for public comment is Susan Park. Susan, you have been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Okay, thank you, Devin. Hello, my name is Susan Park, town meeting member from Precinct 2 on the advisory committee and the PTO chair of the Remote Learning Academy. Miriam, congratulations on your recent win, and it's good to see you all tonight. And Bernard, thank you and the MLK committee for the collaboration with our Remote Learning Academy for the MLK Writing Celebration. I am coming tonight to ask you to seriously consider not voting on these 1 or 2 new storefront licenses, which I am aware you are not voting on tonight, but I wanted to just give my reasons why for down the road. I know at town meeting last week, my motion to refer Articles 19 and 20 to a study committee came out very close. The vote came to 105 yeses, 114 noes, and 10 abstentions. This tells me something very significant, that there are many town meeting members who agree that a study needs to be done regarding cannabis in our town. Now we have 4 storefront licenses and 8 more licenses, 4 for couriers and 4 for the warehouse operator system. I do not agree that adding 2 more storefronts is a good idea at this time, and here's why. First, our health commissioner, Dr. Jett, and the Brookline Advisory Council on Public Health have not okayed more access in the past. Also, Colorado is a few years ahead of us. In the last month, in an effort to curb a rising tide of abuse by teens and young adults, Colorado lawmakers are seeking to crack down on high-potency marijuana concentrates under a bipartisan bill that recently won unanimous approval from a House panel. More data and science is coming out that cannabis, the FDA unapproved drug, has an adverse effect, especially on females. You've heard that cannabis can relax people and they fall asleep easier, and perhaps this is true for some. But in research papers, one particularly titled Cannabis Use and Mental Health in Young People, a cohort study by George C. Patton and his colleagues found out information that is very telling of our young people's path down the road when it comes to cannabis, and it needs to be looked at carefully before more licenses are given. The THC potency is not the same as in the 60s, which was roughly 1 to 3%. Since then, the potency of the marijuana plant is now steadily increased to 9.7%. And that was in 2009 to 14.88% in 2018. So the THC levels have tremendously increased. And these numbers should not, they should astound us. And I'm here just to say that there needs to be more community input before adding 2 more cannabis storefront licenses in Brookline. So thank you. Have a good night.
The next person signed up for public comment is Neil Gordon. Neil, you have been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Neil Gordon, Precinct 1 Town Meeting member and a member of the Advisory Committee. My 2017 warrant article calling for electronic posting of documents was referred to the Select Board for review and for development of an implementation plan. As I noted in my Article 22 remarks at town meeting, 4 years later, we're still waiting. In 2018, town meeting asked the Select Board to review opportunities to reduce the cost of non-electronic communications. 3 years later, we're still waiting. Many additional study requests have been made of the Select Board by town meeting, including most recently last night. It's apparent to many that the Select Board doesn't have the bandwidth for all the town meeting asks of it. In part, that's because town meeting as a whole doesn't appreciate the referral to a Select Board committee commits a cadre of hardworking volunteers to volunteer for even more work. But it's not all the fault of town meeting. The Select Board, through its practice of including a Select Board member on its committees, most often as chair, is a major contributor to a sluggish response. I served on a number of ad hoc committees, some appointed by the Select Board, some appointed by the moderator. Moderators' committees, charged and otherwise left to their own devices, have, in my experience, been generally more effective in meeting, achieving their objectives, writing their reports, and moving on. Select Board committees, by comparison, too often languish, not due to a lack of will, but from a lack of capacity. I urge the Select Board to change its practice. Appoint your committees and charge them accordingly. Let them report back to you periodically and as appropriate, but otherwise, what best it might be for you is to simply stand aside and let the committees do their work. I thank you for your time.
I did want to make the board aware that Anna Albuquerque had signed up for public comment. She was promoted, but it looks like she was having internet issues and she dropped out of the meeting. At this time, there are no other requests for public comment in the Q&A or hand raised in the attendee list.
Okay. You know, if she makes an appearance within the next like 30 seconds, we'll try to accommodate. Otherwise, she is free to submit her comments in writing to the board. So let's move on to the miscellaneous items on our calendar. I believe the first up are the meeting minutes from our June 1st meeting. I'll make a motion to vote favorable to vote approval of those meeting minutes. So Bernard, you're on mute.
Who put me on mute, Devin? Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. The rest of our agenda, I believe there is one item that has been struck, and then there's one item that I would like to take out of the consent agenda, which is 3H. So 3H, I want to have a conversation with the board before we vote on that. And then the 3G above it is no longer necessary because Aaron Galantine, our DPW commissioner, resolved that issue. So if there are no questions about items 3B through 3F, let me just talk about so most of them are temporary wine and malt beverage licenses, Lars Anderson Auto Museum, the Auto Museum, Museum. Yes, so it's mostly temporary alcohol beverage license for the Lars Anderson Auto Museum for a couple of dates and a couple of events. Are there any questions? Okay, so I move approval for items 3B through 3F. Bernard,
Aye.
Raul,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Miriam,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So 3H was a late addition. Mel, do you want to just say a few words about why it was added late, and then we can talk as a group as to whether or not we feel comfortable at this time voting it, or if we should delay it a week.
Certainly. So what 3H is a request by a restaurant to participate in the extended outdoor dining program. And in this case, there is a proposal to use a portion of the Webster Street parking lot, which is a municipally owned parking lot. So similar, I guess, to the to other establishments that you've done in the past. Most recently, I think it was the Punch Bowl property at the new hotel. I believe you also approved HealthWorks proposal for use in a town parking lot. I was not aware, unfortunately, of this when the agenda was posted on Friday afternoon. I did wait until Monday when I could get more clarity on the request, and then we posted a supplemental agenda with that item on it. So, you know, I understand the board may be concerned about expediting it without giving the notice that I think is in the spirit of the law. But I personally don't think we're violating the law. But on the other hand, I think we have a week. We could go a week, but one of the things I would like to suggest, Madam Chair, is that if the board could have a bit of discussion about this, perhaps not voting if you don't feel comfortable, and then we would tee it up for a vote next week. The one thing we want to avoid is going beyond next week. We've made a lot of commitments. Prairie Fire is very concerned and frustrated with the pace of things. So if there are any concerns about this request, I believe Ms. Bruton is here to help answer any of those, or if you want to have some discussion.
So it sounds like there are two different issues going on at the same time. Concerns about allowing this use for this particular public parcel, or whether or not to take this agenda item up right now. So Mel has asked us to have that philosophical question about whether or not we would even entertain this use for this parcel. And then let's talk about whether or not we want to vote this week, or if we should delay. Bernard.
Yeah, are there any issues with this use of the parcel? I don't believe that there are any residential residences around the parking lot. And what would be the objection? It's not really used heavily, as I recall. I mean, I don't go by there frequently, but I'd just like to know what the issues are. And if there are no significant issues, I'm inclined to support this restaurant and approve the request.
I'd like to, Devin, if you could promote Kara Bruton, I think she could help. I'm not aware of any specific concerns, Bernard. I do know that we made a very extensive effort to make sure other commercial establishments, especially restaurants, did not have a concern or also wanted use of that same existing. And we've reached that conclusion that there is no opposition. But Kara, could I ask you, you've been knee deep in this, could you review the issues that the board you may want to make the board aware of?
Sure. Good evening. My name is Kara Bruton, Economic Development Director for the town of Brookline. And yes, as Mel said earlier, this property, similar to 3 other properties now, one for Hamilton Triangle near Farmers Market last year, Healthworks at Babcock Street Lot and Punch Bowl Tavern using River Road. Although the regulations are set up during this kind of temporary post-COVID period for staff to sign off on these licenses, when it comes to properties that are a little bit, larger or not the typical parking space in front of a business, we do want to make sure the select board's aware of it and get your thoughts. Specifically here, we especially would love any feedback on whether there's any philosophical interest one way or the other on propane heaters being permitted as shown in the plans that you've submitted. This would give the fire department an indication of which way to go in approving that. Although they have no problems with it, they just want to make sure as the effective property owner that that's something you would entertain. And then secondly, just to know that there is a pedestrian easement that is being shown on the plans. This is a walkway that goes between Michael's Deli and Shaking Crab and wraps around to the Webster Street parking lot. And DPW has done extensive amount of work and doing site visits with the Prairie Fire Group to make sure that that public access is preserved through their proposed outdoor seating. So those are the 2 kind of big topics of discussion, and any even indication tonight would be great. And if you want to do a formal vote next week, that would be fine too.
I see Miriam's hand.
I just want to make sure that when I was looking at the schematics, I saw there was an accessible parking space. So I just want to make sure that the accessible parking spaces remain available in that, in the, whatever they do.
In the lot, yes, that's a line that no staff is willing to cross. We are not entertaining any bus stops or accessible parking spaces to be even relocated somewhere else.
Great. Thank you.
So any other philosophical questions or concerns about this intended use? Before I call on you, Bernard, I just want to double check with Kara that the businesses that share that building with Prairie Fire are fully aware they were given an opportunity to maybe take advantage of that parcel as well, and they either opted not to or they have no interest.
Yeah, there's been extensive conversations with Michael's Deli and Shaking Crab, and which makes sense. Both of those businesses could potentially use this outdoor seating. I do not have confirmation as of tonight that outreach was done to the dry cleaners or to Subway. We believe that there was a manager to manager discussion, but I cannot confirm that tonight, and the owner of the restaurant was not able to make tonight's meeting. So that is what I know.
Okay, Bernard.
Yeah, that was actually my question. Although I'd also like to say that we're entering a warm period now, and restaurants can operate inside, but still I think it's we want to encourage the return to business of especially the restaurant sector, and if they think this is an important way to get back on track with their business, I see no reason why we should deny it. So, just my opinion.
So none of us have really touched the item of propane heaters.
Pretty hot.
Yeah, I mean,
Like John Needham.
I'm relieved that the fire department does not have an issue with them. Although I know a lot of people who want to get us off of fossil fuels would not really like us using. Oh, the chief is here. Yes, Devin, please promote him. So my concern is more regarding the use of propane, not necessarily as a combustible agent, but the fact that it is a fossil fuel. So I would agree to that, but I hope that we could come up with maybe some creative alternatives. Chief, do you want to just talk about, I guess, why you don't have any concerns about the use of propane from your perspective?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have restrictions and guidance for all of the restaurants who are using propane heaters under the state guidance, and we are enforcing all of those rules for each one of them. It is being done at many of our establishments, so we would not have any objection to this additional establishment. The biggest concerns that we have are storage, and if they cannot meet the code capacity for storage, then they have to remove any excess tanks every night. And so everybody's been pretty cooperative with that, and we're happy to support the business community in allowing those to continue.
Thank you very much. Raul.
Sure. Yeah, and of course, outdoor dining is not something that's totally brand new to Brookline, right? So it's existed before, and we've used propane heating before. I think the issue with propane heat came up previously because we were going to, we did allow businesses to go off the sidewalk into the street. And that was our whole conversation about making sure to have Jersey barriers to protect against, some car maybe, plowing in somehow and causing some disaster. And so we took action there on that. I will say, I had a bite to eat over at the Abbey the other day, and they've got a structure and they have electric heating there. But I think because they have a structure, it allows for the retention of some heat from the electric heaters that maybe wouldn't be possible with the open air scenario that we have here. And so I just don't know that, unless electric heaters are practical and where the wiring would all go and those kinds of things need to get figured out. I don't know that it's necessarily practical here, although it's certainly preferable. As far as the use of this lot, this was a lot, folks may remember that we actually essentially took offline at the height of the pandemic, put some picnic tables out there. It's highly underutilized. I think this is a great use of public land and will help actually not just that business, but help all the businesses in the area with the attention that it brings to that area. So it's good. And as Bernard pointed out, not a particularly residential area either, which is also one of the bonuses of this spot.
Miriam.
Yeah, I would just say, because I didn't voice it earlier, I don't have any issues voting tonight, frankly, to approve this. So.
Excellent. I like your fortitude.
What does that mean?
Well, just, being willing to pull the trigger. John.
A couple of things, if I may. One is, if you will, on the substance of this, and the other is on the question of the, the scheduling of this vote, whether to do it tonight or not. Substance question is, do we have any comparable situation where one restaurant is given this much space that is public space? Because I do know that when we did this, I think appropriately, for Punch Bowl recently, part of the understanding in the arrangement was that it would still be a public space and it would not be treated as sort of the restaurant's space. And what is the understanding here? Is this still a public space? If it's the middle of the day, can I just wander in there and sit down and eat a sandwich or not?
So I can answer that a little bit. With Punch Bowl Tavern, the conversation with the Parks and Recreation Commission, because it abuts and is on River Road and the parkland there. In order to meet both the state requirements for serving alcohol, where it must be roped off and you can't wander in, as well as the public, benefits that we wanted to see on River Road, especially. Some of the tables are open to the public. Tables and chairs are open to the public. You don't have to order anything. Some of the tables are restricted to those that are ordering at Punch Bowl Tavern. This proposal, I believe, is similar. I haven't done a takeoff, but is similar in size to the River Road length. And it's about the same number of tables as was privately tables as was approved for Punch Bowl, but it certainly is, large enough that we wanted to get your feedback on this. And a conversation that we've had with DPW and others is right now we're in this kind of post-COVID, restaurants are still scrambling to try to get back some of their customers in place that may not feel comfortable being indoors. But as we move to future years, in addition to looking at fees, trying to recover the cost of all of the staff that put time in to look at these things, never mind the parking revenue that might be potentially lost, especially in future years as we rebound. The other question is about being fair to all business entities. And so conversations we've had is starting next year, what we'd like to do is for larger public spaces, especially like this, do a formal request for proposals process where on the business side, they would have a little more certainty, maybe for 2 seasons in a row where they could more beautifully invest and make a space really special, but where they have the certainty that it wouldn't just be for, 6 months at a time, but, kind of 2 seasons. So we are thinking that in the future, we would need to formalize this to make sure that we're, giving the most opportunity to creative ideas. In this season, we feel like we're still in a little bit of, recovery mode and trying to help out where we can, especially for restaurants that are reopening, trying to reformat and get things going.
Thank you.
I assume that because I remember us having a similar conversation, I believe when Punch Bowl came before us, or maybe it was another entity. This year we're all trying to recover. We're all trying to support, our local businesses. But I assume after this year we will try to monetize, the use of these public spaces because there is a cost. There's an administrative cost, and then there's an opportunity cost. So I'm willing to approve this, but in the future, I think we have to think long and hard and try to figure out what makes sense and not necessarily give away our public assets for free for private use.
I'll just say I agree with that.
John.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and I apologize for going on too long, but I hadn't finished, and I wasn't sure I got the answer from Kara. If you'll excuse me, Kara, will there be some public spaces as part of this or not?
As far as am aware, this plan is for all private areas. I don't know if Erin Galentine happens to be still in the meeting. She may have different information, but my understanding is that this is all a private area. And that's something that we could take back to Prairie Fire if you wanted, some of the seating to be open to the public.
Well, I think the precedence set by Punch Bowl is a good one. And I would like to see at least a few tables still kept open to the public, so that, as I say, a person could just, pick up a sandwich at Subway and walk around the corner and sit down and eat the sandwich at a picnic table. Now, on the question of the scheduling of this, I'm sorry to say I don't feel we have much wiggle room when it comes to the open meeting law. And if I understand the explanation correctly, this isn't really a gray area. This is kind of the open meeting law says it has to be 48 hours in advance, and this wasn't 48 hours in advance. Is that the problem?
Well, I think that's the underlying suggestion. I don't believe that's what the open meeting law says. It says meetings have to be posted within 48 hours, of which, of course, this was. And then it says that your agenda must include items and describe items as reasonably as possible if they're aware. So, you know, we weren't aware of it at the time. We did repost on Monday, which the law says if you're going to change the agenda, you need to post it as soon as possible and make clear when you did that. So, you know, is there a gray area? There are a lot of litigation over open meeting law meetings, and it's hard to predict how this one would
Well, we can all differ on the gray areas. This one to me is not a gray area. Either it was on the agenda that was posted 48 hours in advance, or it wasn't. It sounds to me like it wasn't. I realized, that there was an agenda with other items on it, and we had this, but that's not the same as it was on the agenda, but it wasn't completely described, or some element of the description was left out that's key. It just wasn't on the agenda, and that's not a gray area for me. So I think, unfortunately, I would not favor taking the vote tonight.
Okay, you have made your position clear.
Thank you.
Aaron, do you want to respond to John's question?
Good evening, Erin Galentine, Commissioner of Public Works. So the proposal that was submitted by Prairie Fire does not include public seating. We did review it on site, and by me, it's myself and the transportation administrator, Todd Crane. We made some adjustments in terms of seating. The pedestrian path will be signed on both sides, making it very clear that it remains open and accessible to the public, and also will be defined by some type of barrier or rope fence or something, so there's no intrusion there. I think the idea of public seating is great, and I think we set a very positive precedent with Punch Bowl Tavern in our discussions on site. The management was really receptive to a whole host of suggestions that we had about some of their ideas for the site. And so I would think that Kara Bruton and I could work with them to try to incorporate some type of public space that could be used by folks that are not necessarily customers of the restaurant. I'd also like to add, we did make some adjustments to their proposals for locations of the propane heaters. They were looking to have sort of these little seating and gathering places on the green space, and we relocated all of those heaters only to the hard top space only. And that will be reviewed by fire prevention, fire department, but as a first step, we wanted to take any of that off of the green space itself.
Is there public seating along the easement next to Michael's?
So we can look at that. That happens to be actually private land.
Okay.
And so it is being used by a business owner. We have an easement over that, but that is not town of Brookline land.
Raul had his hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. I would just say, I don't think this is a big issue here. The opportunity that we have right now is to provide the context in which businesses can experiment for the greater good, right? And so I really would love to see what can happen here if this space is allowed to breathe. And as the chair mentioned before, I think potentially further regulations might be coming down the line. Certainly, a charge for the use of these public ways is coming down the line. We've already made that clear. We'll have to figure out what it looks like, because when we talked about charging before, we talked about essentially parking spaces. This is something on a different order. The same thing with Hamilton is, I think, is on a different order. So in any case, I think there's an opportunity to do those things down the line. I don't see some real pressing need right now to provide space for someone to eat a Subway sandwich on that particular plot of land. I think there are that, having lived in the area, there are other places to be able to do that if that's something somebody wants to do. I'd love to just be able to see what these folks can do with this place, and then as we learn from how businesses would like to use land, then we can start to put in sensible regulations, I think.
Great. John, was that a hand up?
No.
Okay. So let's move on, because I'm getting the sense from the board that there are some members who are uncomfortable voting on this tonight, but we did discuss our concerns, and maybe we will even get a better outcome because of it next week. Bernard?
Maybe we should ask the board, whether we should vote tonight or tomorrow or next week. I got the sense that people are willing to do it.
Well, not me.
Yeah, I know that, John.
Okay.
I mean, if everybody else wants to vote it, I just wanted to be respectful. A fellow select board member is uncomfortable with us voting something. But Bernard, if you want to move, or Miriam, if you want to move it and we vote on it.
Yeah,
I was.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was actually going to say that if John is uncomfortable, then I don't see you. I would rather defer and vote for it next week.
And that way we can get a unanimous vote,
Okay.
Hopefully.
Well,
I appreciate that. Thank
you don't
you.
need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind's blowing.
Yeah, but
Thank you all.
And I don't want to prolong this forever, but I just want to remind people, if there's a question of an open meeting law violation, it can be challenged. It can be challenged at any time, and we aren't necessarily doing this operator a favor if we put them in a situation where someone challenges this and it turns out the vote doesn't qualify. So, got to do it right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
Miriam, I thank you very much for that.
So let's defer a week. Please give our apologies to the owner, and maybe we can find out whether we can squeeze in a public table in the same space.
We'll take a look at those, and we have had communication with Perry Fire about this snafu, and so I think he understands, and I'm sure is appreciative of the board's discussion tonight that would advance things for a definitive vote next week. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you all for the presentation, and hopefully it'll be a quicker agenda item next week. So we're going to move into lodging houses or lodging house licenses. I understand there's going to be a presentation.
Yes, Madam Chairman, I'm going to give it, Madam Chair, I'm going to give a presentation, and we have some members, as well as Tiffany Souza, the licensing agent, will help me, and then we have some members available of the staff to answer questions. But this is the sort of long-awaited review of our licensing audit and some of the work we've been doing to coordinate inspection and enforcement activities. As you recall, there was a fair amount of public concern for some lodging house or lodging houses in a certain area of town, which we understand and we've been responsive to, I believe. So why don't we get into the presentation, go fairly quickly, and then we can open it up to questions. Melissa, are you able to share that presentation for me? Thank you. So the purpose of the presentation this evening is to provide an overview of lodging house laws and regulations, to understand the type and location of lodging houses in Brookline, to review the outcome of our licensing audit, and then to review the process for responding to complaints and to facilitate neighborhood information and communications about lodging houses. The lodging houses are a special type of use that's authorized by state law, Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 140, and it's defined as a house where lodgings are leased or let to 4 or more unrelated persons, and this includes college dormitories and fraternity houses. Typically, there are no individual cooking facilities other than microwave ovens in these units. Although our state law creates an opportunity, and our town regulations permit units of 175 square feet or more to be considered as enhanced SRO units with individual cooking facilities. I'm not sure if there's any units that have been created. I think there might be in one particular lodging house, but that's not typical. The typical lodging house room does not have separate kitchen facilities. And the state requires these uses to be subject to local inspection and oversight and annual licensing. And the major reason I think for that is the safety of the occupants themselves. It's a congregate type of living situation, and there's a lot of concerns about fire and other disasters that could put those residents in danger. So most lodging houses in Brookline have been in place for many, many years, and they preceded the town zoning. Current lodging houses are no longer permitted by right, and they require a special zoning permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. To my knowledge, in my tenure with the town in the last 11 years, I believe there's only been one proposal for a lodging house. You know, there are a lot of legacy lodging houses out there. The town has, in addition to the general laws, adopted extensive regulations to protect the safety of residents and to create harmony with the neighborhood. And there is an extensive set of regulations that control lodging houses. They were last updated in July of 2013. Next slide. Next slide, please.
We're on it. This is the next one, Mel.
Oh, way ahead of me. There are 44 properties that are licensed as lodging houses in Brookline. 31 of them are what we would consider traditional rooming houses or inns. 11 are educational, which are college housing, either dormitories or fraternity houses. And 2 are owned and operated by medical institutions adjacent or in nearby proximity to the Longwood Medical Center to accommodate patient families. The licensees are the owners of the land and the building. And then if an owner is unable to exercise proper supervision, they must designate a resident agent who shall be available on a 24/7 basis. And our regulations require a mandatory training for all licensees and agents. Next slide, please. And this is just a map of where these 44 lodging houses are located. If you'll notice at the top right-hand corner or the farther right-hand corner, there's a whole group of lodging houses, both residential as well as college facilities that are on Lower Beacon Street. There is the medical facilities or the medically owned facilities along the border near Longwood Medical area. And the rest are somewhat located along Beacon Street or the streets off of Beacon Street. As you can see, some heading out Washington Square. Then you've got the dormitories in Pine Manor, which is currently purchased by BC, controlled by BC, and then Helena College. Next slide. So I wanted to just review some of the major lodging house policy issues that are out there. So lodging houses are flexible and affordable options for travelers and persons with underlying financial and social needs. The next option is being without a home for some of these individuals. I was interested when we began to do this sort of at the end of when we were doing this presentation. We learned that the Housing Advisory Board in 2007 issued a report on lodging houses. It's actually very extensive, and I would encourage, and I'll put a link when we can scan the whole document in on the website as well as to you. But that report did conclude that that lodging houses serve an important housing need in Brookline and in the region, and they encourage the preservation of this special type of housing for its contribution to broader housing choice and economic diversity in an otherwise very high cost local housing market. The other issue that comes to bear in these lodging houses is there's frequent turnover in the guest population and in the resident agents who reside there and take care of the property. And that contributes to inconsistent supervision and a lack of communication with the town and the affected neighborhoods. And I believe that tends to be the sort of underlying concern with this, the way we can enforce and inspect these is we need to have a good database that is up to date. And so we did this licensing audit, and at this time I want to introduce Tiffany Souza. Tiffany works in the Select Board and Town Administrator's Office and serves as the Town Licensing Administrator. And she was the one who did the licensing audit. I want to give her an opportunity to let you know what that was all about. Tiffany?
Hi, thank you. So the licensing audit, all 44 properties were thoroughly researched. This was a 3-month project involving me going through the hard copy files, through electronic files, and extensive internet research. I found that 8 properties were identified as having minor discrepancy with room and/or lodging numbers. These will be resolved at the next physical inspection. I found that 13 properties had agents who had not undergone the mandatory training. The agents have since been completely trained. Information was shared back and forth between all enforcement agencies to create an official database. And the licensing database is the foundation to ensure effective and consistent administration and enforcement.
Thank you, Tiffany. I just want to say I've been involved. Tiffany's been working in the town hall during the last several months, and so I've watched her do this audit, and it's very, very extensive and very much appreciated. And as Tiffany said, it really is the building block for which we can effectively administer and enforce these 44 properties. So on an inspection and enforcement, so we have a multidisciplinary approach involving police, fire, building, and health departments. That's because the issues are primarily related to building code and life safety systems. Police are often called to respond to emergencies or public nuisances. And then with the health department, the compliance of the sanitary and health codes are essential. Annual inspections are required for lodging houses, and we take those seriously, and we do those annual inspections. We really see response being 3-tiered. The lowest level is when there's an isolated incident and the individual agency is asked to go to respond and deal with that. We like to keep track of those, but generally those are the lowest level of response. The second level is when the agencies get together and respond in a coordinated fashion. And often that kind of approach really gets the attention of the owners as well as the licensing agents. And we're going to talk about a specific case where we did that. And then the third would really be your board is the town's licensing authority to communicate with those licensing lodging houses, including an up to license non-renewal or revocation. That is a last resort, but that always is available. And we are going to, at times, probably propose that at least you, as the board, gives formal notice and brings licensing lodging houses in for hearing from time to time if necessary. And then finally, neighborhood involvement and communication. It's essential, but frankly, the neighborhood shouldn't have to take the place of town outreach and enforcement efforts. And I know many have felt that they've been sort of left with that, and they have made some very extensive efforts and have been helpful, but we would rather have them be in a supportive role and not take the place of the town. Really, we're the licensing authority and should be doing that. But we also want to communicate with the neighbors and make them part. It's their neighborhood. And I think you'll see in the next slide, we're going to talk about one particular lodging house that was the subject of some controversy this past spring. So I'm not going to mention the property, but I think you recall that there were a lot of neighbors concerned about a particular property or some other, potentially other properties, since many of them are close together, that had multiple and ongoing issues. They included things like tenant and actual security issues, feeling unsafe in their neighborhood. Trash was an issue that was discussed that wasn't being effectively maintained. and controlled in the neighborhood. And then just the fact that the neighbors just felt they had no one to turn to. They were calling the town, but not a lot was getting done because the resident agents or the owners, we weren't calling the right people, or they weren't responsive, or they hadn't received training or what have you. So we initiated a level 2 multi-agency response, and I think it was a very effective one. It was facilitated by Lieutenant Derek Hayes, who did, I think, a wonderful job, communicating with and among the owner, the neighborhood, and other town agencies. And I believe there's been some good progress made there. And in fact, I know there has been, and I know the owner has done a lot of reaching out with the neighborhood. I think a lot of that has to do with the neighborhood, and I want to thank them for their efforts. And then finally, we want to document and follow up, because if these don't get documented and addressed, then we forget about them, or we get up to renewal time and it's too quick and we rush through them. So we really want to do is we want to create documentation to follow up with all these lodging houses, so that by the end of the year, we can feel comfortable making recommendations around renewal. So the next steps, we will continue to refine the database and the processes to ensure up-to-date information, which we, as I said before, we find that's the building block for good enforcement inspection activity. We would like to initiate an earlier and more rigorous process for license renewal for the lodging houses. It would still be ultimately a December 31st renewal, but we would like to start earlier so that we can be prepared in the event of issues. And then finally, we are going to be proposing more regular training of resident agents and license holders. Right now, the requirement under the regulations is annual training. Is a one-time training when they are first appointed as a licensing agent or resident agent. We believe that potentially as often as annual, but certainly more regular training is essential, and we will be making those recommendations at some future time with the board. And then finally, I'd like to acknowledge and thank some folks. Tiffany Souza, you've heard from. Tiffany has been doing a wonderful job with all the town's licenses. She did a similar process with the open air parking license a couple of years ago, and I think we've gotten those under wraps a lot better, and we expect to do the same for lodging houses. Patty Correa, our first assistant town counsel in the legal department, has been helpful to us in the laws and regulations surrounding this. Dan Bennett, of course, the building commissioner. Derek Hayes, who I mentioned, is a police licensing officer and has done a really wonderful job in facilitating some of these. I think many of those are related to police issues, and so they are useful doing that. Deputy Fire Chief Dave Randolph and Fire Captain Todd Cantor in the Fire Prevention Division. Fire safety is essential. Fire escapes and access essential for these types of housing. Roland Lanka, our assistant health director, our environmental health expert, and Di Nugan, our public health inspector. And then finally, the neighborhood liaisons, who I've talked about. I don't want to mention names because I'll forget some, but I think you know many of them. They work behind the scenes in a productive way to communicate with me, to you, and some staff to try to help these neighborhood issues, which they are for the most part. So with that, I'm done with the presentation. Happy to have any questions of me or any of the enforcement personnel. And at this time, I think the next thing we would do is probably have another meeting at some future date to propose changes to our regulations.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that presentation. I really like, the direction that you're heading. I've been on the board for 4 years, and I remember that that these come up after town meeting wraps in the fall when we're all exhausted. We're heading towards the holiday season, and these always seem to kind of come out of left field, and we're always scrambling. So I'm very appreciative to Tiffany Souza for finally getting around to this issue. I want to open it up to board members. I do understand that there are a few people in the audience that want to be heard. This is not a public hearing, So I would entertain up to 3 members of the public that may want to respond to this presentation. I think that they are affected parties, so we should probably hear what they have to say since they're hearing this information for the first time. But let's talk amongst ourselves, and then we'll open it up to 3 members of the public. For those members of the public, please notify Devin Fields via chat if you want to sign up. Okay, who wants to go first? Raul.
Sure, happy to go first, and I'll just join you in thanking Tiffany, who is always great to see. It's the first face we usually see when we go into the select board's office, and I am excited to be back, sometime soon to our meetings in person. What I will say is, I think, first of all, I think this is great. This is exactly what we needed. Getting all those resident service agents online, and then also well trained to do their jobs, and the kind of communication that we have right now with them, I think is going to benefit us in the long run, and hopefully we'll be able to maintain that communication. I think that this conversation arose as a result of a series of problems, but I think it presents an opportunity for us, an opportunity to better engage with these these houses, these lodging houses. But I'm thinking about the folks who live there. And I'm thinking about an opportunity to welcome them, to help to the extent that they're interested, integrate them into the community, and to support them and make them aware of the supports that are available in Brookline, which are significant, right? To make them aware of the social services that we have here in Brookline, to make them aware of things like the Safety Net Fund, which some folks may want to take advantage of, or the Brookline Center, which is a phenomenal resource, the Senior Center, the Center, the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, Community Relations, recreation programs. We have families, we have elders, we have folks who are maybe it may have recently been homeless, people who have dealt with domestic and other forms of violence. I think about the opportunity that we have for those that are interested to engage more with us as a community. And I was hearing in the presentation that some of these folks that there is some amount of folks coming in and coming out, and I think it just puts more onus on us to engage with the residents in these lodging houses. And so that's what I'm thinking about is how do we turn this thing that came from problems into a greater opportunity to better integrate folks in lodging houses who are Brookline residents into the community, and make sure that they're aware of all the resources that we have available to them.
Excellent. Any other comments by board members before we open it up to 3 members of the public to speak? John.
Just a quick question and a comment. If this was already given out, I apologize. Can we put a number on how many people are in fact served by the lodging houses? I heard numbers as to the number of lodging houses, but how many people are served?
I think we may know. Do you have total of lodgers that are, there's so many categories, but I don't know if there's a number that you have on the top of your head.
If we don't have it, that's no matter. I just, if we had it, I thought it would be useful to put it out there. The reason I asked the question is simply to make a point, I guess. Does Brookline get credit for affordable housing for the lodgers who we're talking about, which I assume number perhaps 100 plus?
No, unfortunately, we don't get. They're not on our subsidized housing inventory because there's no public assistance, I believe.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Just because we don't get credit officially doesn't mean we shouldn't take credit for providing or these lodging houses, which for one thing provide housing for people who otherwise would be homeless, at least the case in some of the lodging houses. I don't know how many people there are, but the homeless population that we usually think of here in Brookline are people who really don't want to take advantage for reasons that may be legitimate of the housing opportunities that these lodging houses, for example, offer. So yeah, we're not given credit, but we should take credit. I think it's really great that we're providing this type of support to people who are having difficulties.
I think the true credit goes to the organizations that actually, boots
Of
on the
course,
ground.
of course, of course.
We're just, providing some health and safety guidance. So any comments by other board members? I'm gonna ask Devin if anyone has notified her through the chat or Q&A function, if they would like to speak.
At this time, there are 25 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Well, Tiffany, that is a strong vote of confidence. Keep it up.
I will certainly share the presentation with some of the neighborhood liaisons and ask them to circulate it. And then if there's questions and concerns, we'll encourage them to communicate those to me or you. I believe you did see an email from one resident who submitted.
Yes, I did want to make the board aware that Elizabeth Keene-Tate has raised her hand. Elizabeth, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your time will begin when you're ready.
Hi, I just I wanted to check in with everyone. I was the woman who started this in December, and I did send a note to the select board earlier today from our neighborhood. The circumstances that happened this spring were really actually almost totally handled by the neighborhood. Me and other neighbors finally reaching out to the CEO or the president of the organization that runs 3 doors. There are, I think, 10 lodging homes in 1 block behind us. 3 of them are dorms, Tufts. 3 of them are run by Pine Street Inn. There are single occupancy, there are other types of buildings. The circumstance that happened last spring, the neighborhood actually wound up calling the CEO or president of Pine Street Inn because the situation was so out of control with people in the building needing help, and there was no one there. And I finally did call Lieutenant Hayes, and he went and they took care of the situation that was happening in this building. As we began to explore the issues with the Pine Street Inn, with the president, who at the time that we met with her was seemingly unaware of all of this, it became clear that these residents did not have the support that they needed in these buildings. And there are 3 of buildings, 1017, 1043, and 1045. And, I think as a town, there's different types of housing. Tufts dorms or Boston College dorms, have a certain need. Pine Street Inn, if you're putting people in there who have emotional or substance abuse problems, they need support, and it should not become the neighbor's problem to help them. It should be the town or the organization. And we need the town to lean on these, frankly, Pine Street Inn to help us, because we can't police this. And Lieutenant Hayes was extremely effective and really fantastic, but it was the neighborhood and Hayes doing this. And I just would ask that, perhaps some of these houses should be put into a different category where, we just make sure that everyone's getting the support that they need. That's all I really have to say about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public sign up to speak?
At this time, there are 25 attendees and no one has used the hand raise or Q&A feature to indicate they'd like to make a comment.
Okay. I don't believe the board is voting on this. This was just a presentation to us. So we will wait and see what other changes you recommend to us that we can consider.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. So the next agenda item, I believe, is hold on. the conversation around 2 additional marijuana licenses to get at the issue that we keep confronting about diversification in the cannabis industry. This is another presentation?
No, I really, we don't really have much. I think maybe there's some confusion on my end. My understanding was that we were going to more formally get the board's direction about where to head so that we could begin preparing the required warrant articles and other materials for the special town meeting. Just to be clear, only town meeting can vote to do the things we're talking about. It's not the board, but the board did take an informal, I think, sense of the board, and it was suggested that we should do that again more formally, especially if we're going to be dealing with the last license this evening on our quota. So I know that Monique Baldwin did identify a few options, but I think essentially what we're asking is, is the board interested in expanding the license quota? And presumably for one reason, and that would be to extend opportunities for social equity applicants. So that's essentially the issue. We don't have a specific proposal, but if you wanted us to develop one before you took this vote, we could do that. It would take a little while.
So my recollection from the last time we had a presentation on this issue and conversations we've had as entities come before us for those 4 retail licenses is that this board does want to pursue that avenue. And it's actually kind of nice that the select board can't just do this. We will have to get town meetings buy-in. So the best we can do is propose this, make our case for why it should be done. I definitely understand the concerns that were voiced in public comment. I think there's a lot of misinformation about why we're doing this and the impact it could potentially have. I see Monique Baldwin, she has her hand raised, so maybe she should be promoted. I'll open it up to other board members to speak their piece, but I think we should be directing staff to get a proposal together that could go to town meeting. John, was that a hand raise?
That was a hand raise.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I just want to say a couple of things with great respect to the individuals who spoke earlier in this meeting and who have concerns about this and wish that we would not advance this idea of adding 2 licenses. And they're not alone. I know that there's a number of people who would agree with them in that view. With great respect, I think that they miss some important points about why we're here facing this decision. It's not that we are dismissive of any of the health concerns that are raised as to cannabis, but that isn't really before us. That was decided by the voters of Brookline, who were very well aware of all of those issues when they voted by, I think it was about a 2/3 majority, that they wanted Brookline to enter into this new world of legalization of recreational cannabis use. And not just the voters of Brookline, but also town meeting have clearly directed that this is something that they find appropriate for Brookline to embark upon. And we're doing our very best to do it in a way that is responsible to the users and responsible to the public. But we're not really reopening the debate over the health effects of marijuana. And in fact, somebody made this point the other day, and it's, if they were wrong, they were wrong, but I think they were right, that once the voters say they want to have legal marijuana within the boundaries of Brookline, And it then falls into the hands of the State Cannabis Commission to regulate and determine who are the applicants who qualify. We cannot just pull the rug out from under legalization. It has been endorsed for Brookline, and people have acted upon that endorsement in good faith. And until that endorsement is reversed, I think we pretty much have to do the best job we can with the hand that we've been dealt. And I don't want to put Monique on the spot, but if she happens to have the slide from the PowerPoint presentation she did the other day, I'd love her to put it up. If she doesn't, that's fine. She had a slide that showed the number of cannabis retail applicants or people already granted licenses in the area surrounding Brookline and the surrounding areas. And it was a very high number. I think it was maybe 23. I hesitate to rely on memory for this. But even if we said no to 2 more applicants, that would not stop retail licensees from proliferating. This is a business that has been endorsed by voters, is well underway, and is going to continue to accumulate in terms of the number of licensees. And the big problem facing this board is that we unfortunately arrived at a situation where we used up the first round of licenses that we allowed ourselves. And we really didn't do what we aspired to do, which was to recognize racial equity in the early rounds of distributing licenses. But it's not too late. And that's why we're discussing adding 2 more licenses at this point, which I favor.
Any other board members? Miriam.
I'm just going to have to say, I really agree with what John just said. And I think it's spot on. I mean, I think that, of course, there are real concerns about the public health implications of marijuana use. Of course, we're concerned about youth involvement. I mean, I have a 14-year-old son. It's very personal. But at the same time, part of our job is to do the will of the voters, whether that's our personal will or not. And in this case, actually, I feel very strongly that we should, in fact, remedy our mistake in terms of equity and cannabis licensing. And I would love to see if Monique manages to pull up that image that John is talking about. And I think that's right. We're not going to stop this from happening. We can have some control over it. And I think that's a much better way to approach it. So I agree wholeheartedly with John. Thank you, Monique. That's a very useful image.
Any other members want to weigh in? I will just also echo that this is a process that is also dictated by the state, and these entities have come before us. If we deny their applications without a legitimate legal reason to reject them, it does put us in a tough position legally. And that's a completely separate issue than the issue that is before us. We are trying to remedy something that we just didn't account for the first time around. So better late than never. Raul.
Sure, I'll just endorse what John and Miriam have already said, and you too, Heather. And I'll add this, is that I mean, this might be cold comfort to folks that think there should be no cannabis in Brookline at all. But I think it's most likely that if we expand the licenses, the types of shops we're going to see are smaller shops on the order of not Netta, but the 2 other licensees that we now have, and the other one that we're taking up tonight, in particular because of the the significant lack of access to capital for social equity and economic empowerment applicants. One of the things that stood out to me on that slide that Monique kindly shared is that of those that are up and running right now, just 2 meet that classification. And this really speaks to the systemic barriers, including access to capital, that those entrepreneurs or potential entrepreneurs are faced with. So again, cold comfort to those who want no cannabis whatsoever in Brookline. But I don't think when folks think about this, they shouldn't think about something on the order of Netta. I think it's more likely we're going to see something coming forward that would be on the order of some of the other shops that we have, which are significantly smaller in scope and scale. And by the way, one more thing, I think we've been really effective with the appointment only model. I know that was something that arose out of COVID, really. But you know, the new licensees have really taken to it. You know, Netta is operating under that model right now, and that seems to be working in our community too. And so, just thinking about the other kinds of impacts of having cannabis retailers in Brookline, I think that might be something we want to consider just continuing to make part of our process moving forward too.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Of course.
Hi, Raul, I just had to correct you. Netta actually is accepting walk-ins as of, I believe, Saturday, as of the governor's order. Sanctuary will come before you, the board. I believe it's actually next week, with a phase 4 plan to accommodate walk-ins. So the rest of the mission, as well as ComEd-Cana's license conditions, do reference a phase 4 plan. That thought process was, we didn't know what the phase 4 plan was going to be. And obviously that's just new life now. So the retailers should be coming before you guys to amend their license conditions, but just an FYI.
My thoughts on that are already now clear.
And actually, the point I thought Raul was going to make was there was a special town meeting, like it feels like forever ago, 2 years ago, where town meeting was asked to impose appointment only on Netta. And I remember, the company pushing back, saying that was not realistic, and it was completely different than their business model. And then COVID happens and we adapt. So I think the companies have had to figure out, how to stay profitable with appointment only. And that is certainly something that we will take into consideration as they come before us to amend their licenses. Bernard.
Yeah, I'm all for the warrant article, but I think we need to have a plan B, because remember, there wasn't 100% agreement in town about licensing marijuana stores. And we did have a minority applicant here in Brookline, which created a firestorm at St. Mary's. And as a result, Ascend, I believe the name of the company was, did not get a license, and they made a mistake in measuring, 500 feet from a school. But it was a firestorm that erupted after their application that really prevented them from going forward, and prevented Brookline from having a minority, I think, minority majority owned cannabis store. So, let's not assume that just because the select board wants to expand the number of licenses that we're going to get it out of town meeting. So I'd like to have, I'd like people to give some thought to, what are our plan B options? And they may not be great options, but they could be things like the delivery licenses that we approved, which, aren't perfect, but maybe there are other ways, for example, joint ventures that we could work to encourage some of the existing licenses to enter into. I mean, I don't know how that would work. I'm just saying, let's come up with some plan Bs, because this is not going to be an easy cakewalk.
That is a very good point. And we should always have a plan B, because plan A sometimes gets derailed. So very, very good point. Let's start to think about that. But what's before us tonight is directing staff to at least come up with a warrant article that town meeting would have to consider. And Monique, correct me if I state this wrong, but the state requirement based on our criteria, we had to license 4 entities. If we add to that 2 additional licenses, that becomes fairly discretionary.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So this is more like a nice to have than a must do for people who have contacted us and expressed concern about permitting more entities in town. These are special licenses that would only be given to applicants that meet strict criteria dictated by the state and perhaps by us. So we're not obligated to give these licenses out like we have been for the first 4. Okay. Anybody have any language that they want to make sure gets in? Does anybody want to volunteer to work with Monique and maybe read the first draft? Thank you, Raul. So Monique, do you have enough direction to get started?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
So Raul and I will connect. Thank you.
John, was that a hand raise or volunteering?
No, that was a hand raise. I did have a language suggestion, so to speak. I just want to make the point that I see 2 moving parts to this. And one moving part is the expansion of the number of licenses with the next 2 reserved for equity applicants. But the other moving part is assistance in insofar as the applicants that come forward might have to get, some equity assistance in terms of loans, you name it, to qualify, to have the standing, to have the financial reserves to come forward and to be qualified to hold these licenses. And so I think we're looking at not just adding 2 licenses, but also figuring out what can we do so that there is some social economic equity piece of this that can come into play for applicants who need that kind of extra consideration. Mel raised his hand.
Oh, Mel, you're muted.
I was just going to mention, John, I think that's an excellent point. The point, I believe, of the Racial Equity Fund is to provide some of those supports, and the fact that it's being funded with cannabis mitigation revenue, I think, is important that be a focus of the Racial Equity Advancement Fund. So, not exactly sure. We still have to have some discussion about how that's going to be implemented, but that's what I would say, that's one area where the town is looking to provide that kind of assistance.
Excellent. So if there are no other comments, maybe we slide into the last agenda item, which is actually taking up the issue of whether or not to approve Canna's license. We had a brief presentation last week before town meeting. It's a bit of a blur for me. We had a number of people provide comment. I want to check in with Devin to see if there are anyone who have reached out to see whether or not we would take additional comment. Bernard has his hand up, so I will go to Bernard first.
Hey, I don't mean to sort of go back to what we were just discussing, but I just want to make a note that the Cannabis Control Commission has a pamphlet called Guidance for Cannabis Policies for Municipalities. And there is one thing in there that I think we should consider after talking to town council, because we're going to be a little careful here. It says we recommend that municipalities alternate signing host community agreements with economic empowerment applicants and non-economic empowerment applicants. Now, I assume they've really sort of assessed whether that would create any legal risk. So that's one thing we may want to just look at and see, how that would work, and consider including that in our warrant article.
It's my understanding that Somerville actually has that model currently, and I don't think that they've had any legal trouble. So that's something that we've been just, we're actually like creating this network of municipalities to just bounce cannabis related ideas back and forth off of one another. So that's something that we have looked at. And yeah, I'm happy to connect with Raul, and I appreciate all the ideas.
Great. Great point, Bernard. Thank you so much. So it looks like we have representatives from CANA here. I want to acknowledge you, welcome you. Thank you so much for not attending one, but 2 meetings. So how do I want to do this? Maybe I open this up to select board members if you want to speak, and then I give CANA an opportunity, and then we talk about whether or not we feel comfortable voting tonight. So any select board members have any comments that they want to say before we hear from CANA one last time before we entertain a vote? Raul.
Nothing to add. I'll just ask if during their remarks, if they can comment on, I know last time I'd asked about them beefing up the diversity plan. I saw a memo that indicated that they were doing that. If they can just talk about when they do speak, how they're doing that, that'd be great.
John, you're muted.
I want to acknowledge that we did receive comment from the neighborhood, at least one of the neighboring streets here, that expressed great concern over the fact that 2 licensees are, if we approve this one tonight, are to be located in very close proximity to one another and to the particular neighborhood that abuts Com Ave there. In my own mind, I don't have a problem with this. And it's not because I'm insensitive to the concerns of the neighborhood, but it is because I think that one of the factors that people have to keep in mind is the more retail establishments are approved, and not just in Brookline, but in the surrounding area, the more dilutive it becomes of the total base of customer support. And so you're not necessarily getting twice the ebb and flow of people coming and going to retail establishments just because there are 2 of them. In some respects, they might be dividing up the business. Second point I'd like to make is it's a retail area abutting a residential area. Whether it's a cannabis operation or some other kind of operation, if it's successful, and we always want our retail establishments to be successful, there will be people coming and going. That's just the nature of having retail commercial areas near residential areas. The third point I want to make is that the select board has had some experience now dealing with the impacts of cannabis operations on neighborhoods. And we're going to keep a close watch on this, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that this does not become a nuisance in any sense to the nearby neighborhoods. And that's all my comment on that.
Bernard.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask the company to make sure that in their presentation they address this issue. I was once a teenager. I've had 2 teenage children. This shop is being set up right in Boston University's or near Boston University's campus. I know that you're supposed to have procedures for ensuring that cannabis doesn't get into the hands of underage students. I'd just like you to sort of talk to us about how you've gone sort of out of your way, I hope, to make sure that the witty, or not witty, but these smart students at BU, don't figure a way around your security systems to acquire one way or another cannabis products. In other words, I'm asking for some comfort that that will not be an issue that people come to the select board complaining about in the next few months.
So I'm about to hand the mic over to Adam. We're not expecting like a full-blown presentation, but if you can just address some of the concerns that the fellow board members brought up, and then we will probably talk amongst ourselves and possibly vote.
Great, and thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Again, Adam Baranowski on behalf of the applicant here. So I did want to turn it over to JB Hauk and Garrett Hauk in a moment, who I think can address some of the issues that Selectman Green had mentioned, and then also allow Rob Dixon an opportunity who will be able to give some comments on diversity. Just really briefly, as far as BU goes, we have had several discussions with Cecilia Nardi over at Boston University, and we are planning, assuming if the board does approve this application, to have an ongoing conversation with Boston University. So that is a dialogue that we want to continue to have. Obviously, it's a common goal. Prevention of diversion of minors is an important aspect of cannabis companies' approvals of the state, public safety, and I think that they want to try to make sure that that's not an issue. With diversity, we did provide the updated plan, which mimics in a lot of ways what Mission provided. Just to give you some additional context to that, we had met with Lloyd Gelano a few weeks ago, who had approved of our original plan. When we provided this updated letter to the board, we had sent the notice over to Lloyd as well. And his comments, I had an opportunity to speak to him today, and he didn't mind me summarizing some of his comments. But ultimately, what he thought was that the figures that we provided in that letter, particularly the 50% figures, were an admirable objective. But what his question was whether that is a realistic goal from the jump, and whether it might make sense to have that be a goal that is a target for year 2, and kind of crank things up on a quarterly basis from where our original plan was to meeting those. The thought is to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up or overpromising or providing goals that aren't even met, within the town itself at this point, or the employees of the town at this point, for example. So we're here to listen. We're here to do what the board would like us to do, and I think that that's the spirit that we're coming before you with tonight. But I wanted just to put that out there as something that I think might want to be considered. But with that being said, I do want to introduce to JB Hauk, who's the president of ComEv Canada, to just to introduce himself, say a few things to the board, if the board pleases the board.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate the introduction. First, I wanted to address the issue of any minor diversion. We will have rigorous ID checking to make sure that no one under the age of 21 will be coming into the facility. We'll also have 2 people monitoring security cameras for any kind of possible diversion outside of the space, and to make sure that no one is passing money or passing product that is not personally theirs for their own personal use. So that will help to mitigate any of issues that you might have with diversion outside. Anyway, my name is JB Hauk, and I am the president of ComEv Canada. My brother Garrett will be our operations manager. For the past 2 years, I've been working in the cannabis industry. I first came into industry as a bud tender or a patient advocate. I'm now the wholesale manager for a Massachusetts-based cannabis company. ComEv Canada is very different than any other licensed cannabis company in Brookline. We're not a multi-state operator. We're not a large publicly traded company. We're a small, locally owned family business. I grew up in Mission Hill in the late 80s and 90s, where I personally witnessed our community torn apart by the war on drugs. Many of our friends and neighbors were victims of this war. Since leaving Mission Hill, I've been living in Dorchester for the past 8 years. My current residence for the past 5 years has been identified by the CCC as an area disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. I spent a majority of my youth here in the town of Brookline. I attended the Apple Orchard School for kindergarten and the Dexter School for elementary. My first jobs were here in Brookline. I worked at Brookline Ice and Coal, Brookline Foreign Motors, as well as our family business, which has been located at 1030 ComAv since 1997, Perfect 10. I attended their academy where I had the privilege of being taught by Mr. Rob Dixon. For over 25 years, Rob has devoted his life to shaping young minds and serving the underprivileged communities of Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Brockton, and Randolph. He has literally and figuratively saved hundreds of students that would have been left behind to become victims to the streets of these communities. Rob's close connection to these communities will allow us to recruit and hire the best and brightest, as well as to help us surpass the goals stated in our diversity plan. Rob is the founder of Rise Academy and our diversity and inclusion officer. And it's my privilege to introduce you to Mr. Rob Dixon.
Thank you for that, JB.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you to everyone for giving me this opportunity to present. As JB said, this is not a sprint, it's a marathon. We don't expect to meet these expectations in the short term, but this is a long-term objective. My goal and my job or responsibility is to make sure we meet those expectations. I'm committed and I believe in what they're doing. I believe in the services that potentially they're providing. And more importantly, as JB mentioned, Rise Academy will be a beneficiary of a lot of this support. If you don't know, we've sent over 400 kids to college, 4-year colleges from this program. It started as Project Rise back in 1993. It is now evolving into Rise Academy, which we are now instituting ideas to look at college campuses, which serves the purpose, so to speak, where many of these kids can get access to college campuses and avoid the anxiety of going through that process to participate in college. So in the long run, as I said, this is not a sprint. We are hoping to do this over a period of time. We will set benchmarks, they will be quarterly, and I'm committed to this, but not only committed to bringing diversity, but creating an environment of inclusion and accountability. Inclusion and accountability, very important, where people feel like they're appreciated and accepted at this place of business. And more importantly, your candidates of color become your greatest resource in terms of bringing additional staff of color to the place. Thank you.
Anyone else from CANA speaking? Otherwise, we'll come back. I think Garrett wants to speak.
Please. Thank you, and thank you for having us this evening. I'm the operation manager of ComEv CANA. I graduated Johnson Wales, bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship, human resources, training and development. I've been operating my own landscape construction company for the past 15 years. Growing up in Mission Hill was not the easiest part or the easiest place to grow up. I was obviously envious of the white picket fences of the suburbs. Mission Hill was far from a safe area when we grew up here. Cars are being stripped and burned 2 streets over from us. A lot of our friends were victims of the war on drugs, some of whom are no longer with us. Gang and drug violence is a real part of Mission Hill. As a kid, my mother would always tell us to tell people that we were from Brookline and to avoid any gang retaliation between the Heath Street Projects, Mission, Maine. I was fortunate enough to go to the Jackson School, Newton, the Carroll School, the Minuteman Tech, where I studied horticulture, landscape management, and forestry. If you have any questions pertaining to our diversity plan or positive impact plan, I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm gonna take it back to the select board to make sure that their questions were answered adequately. I think we also need to have a brief discussion about this latest development of whether the 50% goal at the outset is a reasonable expectation or if it should be something considered for year 2. I'm going to have Devin check in with the 2 people who have raised their hands and see whether or not they want to speak. But Raul, was your question, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about how to handle the 50% question.
I think, one of diversity in hiring is difficult, to be sure. What I'll say is it doesn't get easier in year 2 after you fill positions. The the greatest opportunity you have to build a diverse staff is before any positions are filled, is to start that way and then try to maintain a diverse staff. I think if you were to staff up at, I don't know, 30% as you had in the last proposal, and then try to work your way up to 50, I mean, I've got a little bit of experience in this area. I don't see how you do that in year two, quite frankly. It would take you a lot longer than that to get there. I think what you want to do is you want to start off, in your hiring process, making sure that you hit those targets. And then the struggle, if there is one, is going to be to maintain that over time.
Any other board members want to weigh in? I thought you guys did a pretty good job of addressing the diversion to minors, but interested to hear from my fellow select board members if they had any follow-up questions or comments. Otherwise, seeing none, I'm going, oh, Bernard.
Yeah. So I would like you to sort of elaborate on these cameras you're talking about, watching the outside. I mean, cameras in Brookline raises a huge hornet's or disrupts a huge hornet's nest. But I guess, I don't see that as really an effective way of dealing with this unless the cameras are more than just focused on the sidewalk in front of the building. And, I was wondering if there are other things that you do. For example, sort of manual walks around just to notice what's going on after someone acquires a piece, some marijuana.
So we do have Bill Taylor from Ed Davis's office here. He might be able to apply. Bill, could you address that? Who's our security consultant?
Okay, I was a little concerned he was a member of the public that was just very anxious to to speak. So, Bill Taylor, please, if you can answer the question.
Great, thank you very much. And I have 37 years of experience in law enforcement and police work in Massachusetts. And currently I work for the Ed Davis Security Consulting Company in Boston. We currently have numerous cannabis clients across the state. And this issue does come up quite frequently. And I think it from a perspective of guaranteeing there's no underage people purchasing and diverting marijuana, it really starts, I think, at the signage level, at the street level, and as potential customers enter into the establishment. So there's ample signage that indicates that it's only for individuals over 21. Then ComAv will have a person at the street level right as they enter into the initial doorway. That person will do a first verification of the individual's identification to make sure they're 21 years or older. They'll do that verification using a scanner capability where they can immediately check that individual's identification using software products. But it also, they will engage that individual if there's any question in a conversation and try and make an accurate determination at that point before the individual even gets into the stairway, into the property, in terms of their suitability to purchase, make sure they're over 21. Assuming the individual clears those hurdles, then they'll come up to a second security checkpoint at the second level, the reception desk. That person's responsibility will likewise to double check the individual's age and make sure they're over the legal threshold. The security camera footage also comes into play because that's part of the signage. The individuals that come in understand that there is secure video surveillance capabilities available, and that very frequently serves as a deterrent effect to underage individuals that may try and penetrate through the various layers of securities that have built in to the system. And really it's a layered system to make sure that no underage individuals get into purchase.
Yeah. Can I follow up? Heather?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I think the question is not whether you can keep underage people out of your store, but rather can what processes do you have in place to prevent diversion? Now, maybe there's no way that you can prevent it ultimately. I acknowledge that, but what things are you doing to at least make it difficult for diversion to occur? Maybe down the street. And I'm thinking that having someone walk around the area, just monitoring what people are doing, is not a perfect solution, but at least is something that would have a deterrent effect, at least with many students. So.
No, I agree. We could certainly have one of our employees do a lap around the building just to see what's going on. Also, we will be monitoring to see if people are making abnormal purchases, like constantly every day, potentially hitting their limit, which is an ounce a day. That would be potentially a trigger that you could see that someone is possibly diverting, not 100% positive, but there's a possibility. So we'll be monitoring all those things to see if people are doing any abnormal purchases.
John.
I have a question, and in a way it's for us as a board. We heard Mission surprise us a little bit with a very ambitious plan for minority representation in their workforce. And I'm wondering, is what was presented to us in any sense binding, or is it just sort of an ambition that they expressed to us? Because if we made it binding, shouldn't we make the same requirement binding on future applicants? I don't see why we would treat one applicant different from another. And who is the enforcement person for all of this? Is it Lloyd Gelano? Do we even have that authority?
Is it legal?
Yeah.
I think Monique wants to try to answer this.
Trying to answer it, yes. It is my understanding that the select board will take into consideration if the retailer has been meeting their goals. I know that Lloyd, I think he's the director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. There are 180 days after the license has been issued, generally June, a status report will be due. And at that point, if Lloyd, sees anything that is shocking or jarring or just not, in line with what you guys want, then a public hearing could be had to course correct at that particular point. But I think the opportunity really is, right before the annual license renewal, about how you guys want to approach, renewing the license or not.
Okay.
Any other board members? Adam, did you want to close the loop on CANA's end?
Sure. And I mean, if I could just address that issue, it's my understanding is, and maybe I'm wrong as far as mission goes. My thought was that the diversity plan are goals, and that the CCC has a whole line of regulations regarding the goals and metrics to try to reach the goals and ways to determine whether or not you've met them. And I would assume that the reporting would be somewhat similar to Brookline. I don't know if you can mandate the percentages because percentages may or may not be there, but what we could do is tell you if the goal hasn't been met, why hasn't been met? What have we done? Who were the applicants? Who were interviewed? Who was hired? So you can kind of really see what the process is. And I think that the metrics will determine, and I think, particularly with the diversity office in town can wade through that as that's their area of expertise and can determine whether or not that's a good faith effort to meet the objectives or if they've been met or exceeded. So I think that from the applicant's point and from dealing with this at the state level, I believe that that's how it's worked out. I don't know if Brookline takes that same approach.
Okay. Thank you for that. If there are no other comments by board members, I would like to give people from the public an opportunity to speak. You are limited to 3 minutes. I apologize for making you wait.
For
Yeah.
Oh, Raul, did you have one last comment?
Yes, I would just say I'm absolutely very happy to hear from anybody who wants to speak. I will note that the last time Canna was before us, we had a number of people provide character references for the Hawks. I certainly will stipulate that there are a great many people who will testify to the character of the folks that are bringing this forward. And by the way, I think it is notable that this is a group that is local, unlike the other folks that we've had before us. So I know there may be people here who are also wanting to testify on their behalf. I'll just say, you're welcome to, certainly, but it is something that we've heard and we've heard loud and clear about the good character of the people before us.
So I think Raul's point is, please keep it brief.
Yeah.
So who is our first public speaker?
The first person signed up for comment is Elton. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your time will begin.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elton Muka. I moved to the United States 20 years ago. My first job was with John. Being from a predominantly Muslim country, and this was like the 9/11 times, nobody would give me a job, but John actually gave me one, and he actually promoted me through the business and taught me the business. And he was the only one that would hire me. I moved up through the ranks till I became a manager. John also sponsored me, and I got my my papers and consequently my citizenship through him. JB and Garrett and Francie are like family to me. The first few years I spent pretty much every Thanksgiving over there at their house. Like I said, I call them like my brothers. I'm not the only person who has benefited from them. I could count plenty of cooks and dishwashers that John has helped, whether it's giving a ride home through a snowstorm or reaching out to like their doctors or lawyers on their behalf, or even actually helping them with food and money. I'm not here to talk about John, we all know, and John and Francie and JB and Garrett, but I'm here to say that, like, you know, the small businesses are like the fabric of our community, and I cannot think of any other business or any other family than John to give that license to. They have done an outstanding job, whether it was in North End or in Brookline, and giving a license to a CEO on the golf course or make the decision would be wrong. My story proves this. My story proves my point. And John and Francie, they have been like not only dear to me, but they have been upstanding citizens and community members. So I fully support them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Signed up for comment is Chris Harris. Chris, you've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and your 3 minutes will begin.
Good evening, board and Madam Chairman. My name is Christopher Harris. I'm going to keep it short and sweet because I know you were sick and tired of hearing about character references, because they already know that they're great people. I lived with JB for multiple years. Garrett and I also got along very well. Worked together at the living room, who, by the way, was Elton, by the way, hired me to work there. So the fact that we're talking about minority inclusion and a minority hired another minority, we're already on the right path. I am currently working with the partnership team with the Haven Life, which is a Massachusetts subsidiary. So I just wanted to come here today to just say that John and the company, they know how to run good business, whether it makes sure they are securing the area so that you aren't seeing any proliferation of drugs pass from a purchaser to a younger individual. Something that we kind of stopped at the living room with people passing drinks or IDs all around the facility. with cameras, things of that nature. They're on top of all that. As far as giving people an opportunity to be promoted within the business, absolutely something that they were already familiar with. After Elton left, I was lucky enough to be promoted to head of security when we were working at the legal. These people are level-headed individuals. They're business savvy, and they're going to bring value to the street and to the town of Brookline. Which, if they wouldn't have, the Tangent Law would have gone a long time ago. By the way of saying, as opposed to a map. Just here to again reiterate the fact that you have a solid applicants with this group, and it would be beneficial. It would be beneficial for the entire town to include these individuals as part of the business of commerce going forward. So I have to say, I gave you 30 seconds back. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
The next person signed up for comment is Trevor G. You've been promoted to a panelist. You can unmute and share your video if you're comfortable, and your time will begin.
Hi. So I just noticed a couple of things while I was listening. The plan. It seemed like to me that this seems to be a plan B. You guys were talking about plan B. There's a lot of other dispensaries around, like Ascend, that don't have a creative or artistic view on how to exist, I guess. And I noticed that, and they're in a prime location, North Station, where it's right down the street from a courthouse and a grocery store and the trains. I'm a half Black, half white individual. I'm also again part of the LGBTQ. So diversity, I don't really think is going to be an issue whatsoever. And as for the worry about passing on weed or cannabis or whatever to younger individuals, they do take very good care of making sure that people are ID'd in any cannabis dispensary that I've been to. So, and I don't think that they would do anything differently because they don't want to get in trouble. But yeah, so that's my thoughts, and I hope you all have a great night.
Thank you. Is that the last person who notified us that they would like to speak?
Yes.
Okay. I am going to take this back to the board because we need to vote. This is the last thing on our agenda, and we have been through 8 nights of town meeting, and our staff are pretty tired. So, board members, any comments, thoughts? I want to take a temperature of whether or not you feel comfortable to vote on this evening. Bernard.
Yeah, I feel comfortable. I also want to make a comment. You guys have arranged for a lot of people to come and support you. And that doesn't usually mean something because it's easy to get your friends to do that. But I do want to commend you for the fact that tonight and last week, there were a number of people who focused on how you gave people who did not have an opportunity, with other businesses, an opportunity to get a job, despite the fact that they may have been a person of color, or in the case of one person tonight, from a Muslim country during a time when that was not a great thing to be if you wanted to get a job in America. And I think that although these were people who you organized to come to us, the substance of what a number of them said, I think is useful for our consideration with respect to the diversity plan. I mean, diversity is not just something that you say you'll do, it's something that you need to show evidence that you're really committed to by what you have done. So it's more important than what you will do. rather what you have done is really a sign of what the success or failure of a diversity plan, like many things, will be. So I just want to make that point in your favor, despite the fact that you organize all these people to come and give you praises.
Any other comments by board members? John, and then Raul.
Sorry, just want to be sure I could be heard. Much the same as Bernard. I don't want to, give away anything, but I think in the case of this applicant, I've heard a lot that I like. I gotta say that. We're sometimes quick to criticize and to pick applications apart. But I feel this has been an extraordinary level of authenticity brought to the table here in terms of life experience and in terms of just the quality of the human beings involved in the enterprise. And, that doesn't mean that we're going to be any less judgmental when it comes to performance. But it does mean that when we see something that we like, we'll say it. Just like when we see something we don't like, we'll say it. And I've seen a lot that I like from this applicant.
Raul.
Sure, thank you. I agree with what Bernard said and what John just said too. I think it matters that you all are local. I think like John said, we've been through a few of these before and always leave not feeling with the greatest, the greatest feeling, that sort of need to approve those who've come before us, but not exactly thinking necessarily that this is the right group of the right ownership group that we'd love to see in Brookline. But we don't get to just pick and choose our favorites based on these conversations. So I feel really good about the conversations we've had, and I think John's points about even despite that, we still need to make sure that we hold all applicants and licensees' feet to the fire. What I will say, and this is not a license condition or anything like that, but I think, again, we had a conversation earlier about, or at least I offered some thoughts about opportunities here. I think there is an opportunity for you all, and maybe the other licensees too, but I see something particularly in you all to help us. You listened, I think, to the conversation we had earlier about this board wanting to expand the licenses that we have in Brookline to be able to include social equity and economic empowerment applicants. I think there's a lot, as we've got Monique and others that are working on this issue, but I think there's a lot of insight that you all as operators might be able to provide also. And maybe that's in the form of mentorship of these folks that we're working to support, and maybe that's in the form of helping us find access to capital for those folks. But I think, I hear about the things that you've been able to do for others through your other businesses. And I'm just wondering out loud, and this is a conversation for, again, not a license condition or anything like that. This is a conversation for after this moment, if there's a way that you all can help us with that. Because I think we want to get it right. We didn't get it right the first time, and that's for a number of reasons, but we want to get it right. And if there's some way that you all, based on your previous work, can help us do that, I wish you would. And that's a conversation that I hope we can have after this. Thanks.
Miriam.
I feel compelled to say something because otherwise I'm the only silent. I'm not silent. I'm almost never silent. But I will say, I think John used a word that really struck a chord with me, which is authentic. I find that you listened to us last week. I find that you've been careful in crafting your operational plan. And I find that the people who come to speak on your behalf to be very authentic. And that I think, to say what Raul said, it gives a much more Brookline feel to it in a positive way. That's not always a positive thing. In this case, it is. And so I really appreciate that. So I just want to say, I do think that who your friends are matters here, and who you're bringing to the table to speak on your behalf has been nice to see and to hear how you are paying it forward. So I really appreciate that. But also what John said, we still have to do our due diligence. Nothing really original here.
So I'm gonna try to make a point, but it's a little bit of a longer point than I usually make, and it was triggered by something that Raul said. So once upon a time in 2019, we took on shared electric scooters, and one of the delightful surprises when we took that on was finding out that it did not erode the ridership of our shared blue bikes. In fact, ridership on this, what I thought was a competitor, actually increased at the same time. And the point I'm trying to make is, to Raul's point, I think that there is something when you have like businesses. A lot of people see them as direct competitors, but sometimes it actually creates a synergy. So, give some serious thought to mentoring, business that could one day open and be perceived by some as a direct competitor, but could actually help your business and other businesses like this in the future. So I will move for. I'm going to recite the vote language if everybody is ready. Bernard.
By the way, don't we need to at least ask if people have questions about the conditions of our license?
Okay.
Okay. I mean, I don't, but I just think that as a formality, we have to give people the opportunity to raise any questions.
Do any members have any questions, concerns, want to tweak the language over the conditions? Seeing none, I will.
By the way,
sure.
Never forget it. Never mind.
Can I just say? I'll just say one thing briefly. I think as we, wherever we fall in the cycle of approving sort of the license conditions, I think John's point earlier, I think was a good one, is that we should endeavor to keep them as consistent as possible across licensees. So sometimes we think of some new innovation or some new idea and we place it as a condition, and we should just remember that through the process, so that if we think it's a good idea for one licensee, I don't see why it wouldn't be for others. And so we should just kind of remember that as we go through our renewal process.
Excellent. Monique, do we consider all of the license re-ups at the same time for marijuana?
Yes,
Okay.
so all of them are right before December 31st. And to Raul's point about just keeping everything consistent, the conditions before you regarding ComAv Canna, they are a little bit different, but that's just because the transportation demand management plan that has not been town approved yet. The applicant wanted you guys to approve the conditions on with the how do I explain that? I'm sorry. With the transportation demand management plan to be approved after the fact. So there are some added conditions just regarding transportation and just the management of that. So that's really the only change in terms of the difference between the license conditions before you and other retailers.
Got it. And I assume that the transportation demand management, it's like cart and horse right now. So they're waiting on us.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay. So I am about to read the language. Any objections from any of my select board members? Okay. I move approval of ComAv Canna for a license to operate a marijuana retail dispensary at 1030 Commonwealth Avenue in Brookline. Its license conditions as presented, and the proposed manager, J.B. Hawk, president of ComAv Canna. And I apologize if I butchered that last name. Bernard.
Aye.
Raul.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Miriam.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Thank you very much for incorporating our feedback, for appearing before us and answering all of our questions. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Good luck.
Good luck.
So that is the end of our business this evening. Thank you for those who are still with us. Wow. I think we just lost about half the attendees. So if there are no comments by select board, I will adjourn this meeting so that our town staff can rest, recover from town meeting. Okay, see you guys soon.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Right.